Hi guys, so this is another favourites video and I'm going to talk about some classics that I love. Now the first book I wanted to talk about I do not have here. Someone has my copy. Someone always has my copy of things. I should make a list of whom I lend things to. Anyways, it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and I love Wuthering Heights because it's so easy to hate it. It's one of those books where people get really divided by. People can love it passionately and people loathe it with a passion, with an equal passion. And I think it's like, that's the kind of narrative it is anyway, and that would quite fitting for the characters too. It took me a while to appreciate it. It was like after the first two reads and I really came around to enjoy it, because the characters it features are so horrible. They're vile, almost all of them. There are some you can feel pity for, and you know, you empathise with them, but they're still not nice human beings. And of course the two protagonists, Heathcliff and Cathy, are some of the most mean-spirited, manipulative, vicious, violent, hateful human beings ever put down on paper. And so they're really deserving for each other as lovers, because they're just horrible. I hate them. But they're fantastic to read about because they're just so interesting. And all the characters are so flawed and varied in their personalities, and I just think the story is that much more real for it. Although, like, you have to credit Emily Bronte because it doesn't leave you necessarily despairing about humanity, but it's just a realistic portrayal of people at their very worst, really. And I find it interesting for that reason. And the way the narrative is told, I think, is really cool. And it's just, yeah, I just find it interesting that one of our most, like, notable, most renowned classics is a story of love between two really tainted, messed up people. I find that interesting. And sticking with the Brontes, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, I really love. I love the character of Jane. I think that she's just really interesting to read about again. I don't always necessarily connect with her in terms of her morals and things, because she's so steadfast in them and stuff. It's sort of, you feel like you should have a distance between yourself and her at times, but she's just so superbly written and really fully realised and very consistent throughout the book, and I just found her a lovely role model, really. And her relationship with Mr. Rochester is just really, again, I'm going to keep using the word interesting. It's just very interesting to read about and see develop, because I don't necessarily like Mr. Rochester at times, and there's good reason for that. He's a bit of a douche at times. Yeah, I mean, their relationship doesn't necessarily, for me, paint this picture-perfect scenario by any means. Even when the ending arrives and it's a happy conclusion, I'm always left feeling a bit uncomfortable and insecure about stuff, and I just admire that. I love that the Brontes were able to write great stories that were really unsettling under the cover of this, like, you know, romantic gothic feel and stuff. I just, what a messed up but creatively fantastic family, really. So yeah, Jane Eyre. Because I'm doing classics, I need to mention my favourite Austens. So Northanger Abbey, because it's fun and frivolous, and I love Catherine as a protagonist, and Henry Tilney is my favourite Austen romantic hero. I love him, and I love the story. It's lots of fun, and yeah, I love the style of it and the tone, because it feels so different from the others to me. Yeah, lots of fun. I love Northanger Abbey. And on a more serious note, I really like Sense and Sensibility, because I love Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood as sisters and their relationship, and the two of them as individuals, and how it paints their emotional landscape and their mental landscape too, especially Marianne's depression and stuff. I think it's one of the most mature books, for me, that Austen wrote. I know a lot of people like Persuasion and things, but yeah, Sense and Sensibility takes the cake for me. I'm not a huge Pride and Prejudice fan, so sue me. Where am I? I'm going to do some anthologies, because I'm a fairy tale nerd and I love geeking out over that kind of thing. I have to mention the Grimms, because they were notably one of the greatest collectors of folk tales and oral tales, and they set them down in spectacular fashion and did a great job. You know, we wouldn't have all the amazing stories that we have now in our possession if it weren't for their hard work. So yeah, the Grimms. And I love this edition because my friend drew the cover for me. And she talented in a bouffant. It's very cool. And then Hans Christian Andersen, his fairy tales, because they are the frickin' saddest things you will ever read. But they're so beautiful, but they are so sad. Have you read The Real Little Mermaid story? Oh dear. So just really depressing. That poor man needed a hug, but they're beautifully written all the same. And then another anthology, Ovid's Metamorphosis, because it's all the Greek myths are in here, all the notable ones we know. Cupid and Psyche and Pygmalion and everything is in here, and they're sick and twisted and really violent and really sexual and really lyrical and poetic and beautiful, and yeah, the Greek myths. And final anthology is Oscar Wilde's short fiction, because I especially love his fairy tales too. So he had The Happy Prince and Other Tales, and it's in here, and my favourite of his is The Nightingale and the Rose. It's very, very beautiful, and again, a really sad one. So I always pair him in my head, his short fairy tales with Hans Christian Andersen. I think they would have been friends. But of course Oscar Wilde was a genius anyway, and a very funny, very clever man, so his short fiction. And I'm mentioning 2 plays because I can, and I regard these as classics. And both of them got turned into musicals that I adore, so that's a plus. So we got My Fair Lady from George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, which is a fantastic play, honestly one of my favourite ones. I just love reading it, it's just so much fun, so clever, and yeah. And then of course we got Spring Awakening from the Frank Dedekind Spring Awakening, and it's warped and odd and really surreal, but yeah, still really emotional and affecting, and a very notable play for its time and what it said about sexuality and teenagers and all that kind of thing. So I love these 2 as plays very, very much. And finally, I didn't mention these earlier because as a series I don't like the final 2 books. I'm not a fan of Little Men or Joe's Boys, but I love Little Women and Good Wives by Louisa May Alcott. And this is my awesome Little Women musical bookmark. Got it from when I saw the musical on stage, it was amazing. And yes, a lot of people consider Little Women is actually an amalgamation of the 2. All of the films combine the 2 books into just the one, so you might know just Little Women as these 2 books, but this is just the direct sequel. And they're fantastic because they're the March Sisters, and who doesn't love the March Sisters? And everyone had a favourite, and their personalities were so distinct, and their voices were varied, and Marmee was fantastic, and just the women in this series were amazing. And Laurie, of course, I love Laurie. Everyone loves Laurie, I hope. But yeah, the March Girls. So that's my favourite classic. And yeah, I'm gonna go now. Bye!